Centaur is a predominantly green creature type that made its debut in 1995's Ice Age. Centaurs are beings from Greek mythology, of course, that are part horse and part human. While they are common on Theros, Magic's Greek-inspired plane, they do appear on other Magic planes too. One of the more plentiful creature types I've never done an MTG top 10 on. There are 87 cards that have the Centaur creature type or create Centaur creature tokens, and in this video we'll take a look at the 10 that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. Use the links in the description to visit their store. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I rank cards in these videos. I use a scoring system where a card is awarded 2 points for first tier top 8s like Pro Tours, and 1 point for second tier top 8s like regional championships. At number 10, it's Burning Tree Shaman. For one generic, a red, and a green, this Centaur is a 3/4, and anytime a player activates an ability that isn't a mana ability, the Shaman deals 1 damage to that player. So you get a nicely statted creature with a symmetrical effect that punishes activated abilities. That's certainly the kind of card aggressive decks can be interested in. It was played in Gruul and Zoo aggro decks while it was in Block and Standard, and it even has one Legacy top 8, because it pretty much shuts down the Cephalid Illusionists, Nomads, and Core combo, which can let you mill your entire library by repeatedly targeting the Illusionist with the Nomad's activated ability, which you can do for free and at any time. Adding those pings to the mix is important since it limits just how much they can use the ability. While hating on abilities like that is sometimes useful, like against Nadu in Modern right now, there are better ways to do it now, like Harsh Mentor, so Burning Tree Shaman hasn't had a top finish since 2007. At number 9, it's Spellbane Centaur. For 2 generic and a green, it's a 3/2 that makes it so your creatures can't be the target of blue spells or abilities from blue sources. The Centaur is pretty great at shutting down blue interaction, apart from counter magic, which it doesn't stop. Obviously, that makes it a good sideboard card against blue, and it even saw some main deck play in both standard and extended, because one of the most heavily played decks in the format was Squirrel Opposition. The deck's whole game plan was to generate squirrel tokens with Squirrel Nest and keep all of your opponent's stuff tapped by tapping your tokens with Opposition in order to tap your opponent's stuff. But the Centaur made it so your creatures couldn't be targeted by the powerful enchantment, shutting down most of that deck's game plan, especially because most of the deck's other interaction was also blue. The Centaur hasn't put up any top 8 since 2003 though. At number 8, it's Loaming Shaman. This Centaur is 2 generic and a green for a 3/2, and when it enters the battlefield, target player shuffles any number of target cards from their graveyard into their library. The Shaman is useful against graveyard decks since you can shuffle your opponent's graveyard into their library, but it's also nice that it has the utility of letting you shuffle cards back in from your own graveyard, something that's necessary sometimes. It has predominantly been played as a sideboard card in Standard, Extended, Modern, and Legacy. In Modern and Legacy, it's often appeared in toolbox decks that use Court of Calling and Green Sun Zenith respectively. In Legacy, it used to be played in Alurin decks, which are pretty reliant on creature-based combos, so the Shaman was sometimes needed to get your combo pieces back into your deck, but it hasn't put up any top 8 since 2014. At number 7, it's Call of the Conclave. For 1 green and 1 white, it's a sorcery that creates a 3/3 Centaur creature token. 2 mana for a 3/3 is a pretty sweet deal even today, and that was an even more impressive rate between 2012 and 2014. As a result, Call of the Conclave saw play in Selesnya aggro decks in both Block and Standard. These decks also had a hefty token sub-theme, using cards with Populate like Rootborn Defenses, and when you can get a 3/3 Centaur out of Populate, you're going to feel pretty good about things. Call of the Conclave hasn't found any success since rotating out of Standard, though. At number 6, it's Phantom Centaur, part of a whole cycle of phantom creatures from Judgment that I loved when I was a kid. Each of them enters with counters and prevents damage that would be dealt in exchange for a counter. This one is 2 generic and 2 green for a 2/0 with protection from black, and it enters with 3 +1/+1 counters on it. In other words, it's a 4 mana 5/3 that is very difficult to kill with damage, and because of protection from black, most removal that doesn't use damage can't kill it either. The Centaur was played in green aggro decks while it was in Standard. These decks could enhance the Centaur's stats with cards like Elephant Guide, and once you do that, the Centaur can never be killed by damage. It also has a single extended top 8 from a Tallowisp deck. The Wisp lets you search up auras when you cast spirits, so you could play the Centaur and grab something to augment its stats when you do. However, the Centaur hasn't gained any points since 2008. At number 5, it's Conclave Mentor. For a green and a white, it's a 2/2, and if one or more plus and plus 1 counters would be put on a creature you control, you put that many +1 on it instead, and when the Mentor dies, you gain life equal to its power. The Mentor is a great way to accelerate your plus and plus 1 counters, and it's nice that even if it goes down, it gives you some life, and should there be counters on it, it may give you quite a bit of life. While it hasn't found any success in formats with smaller card pools like Standard or Pioneer, it has proven to be really good in Modern, where it sees some play in hardened Scales decks. It has the same triggered ability as the Scales, so it gives you some redundancy. It sees even more play, though, in Heliod Life decks. These decks look to combo off with Heliod Suncrowned and either Walking Ballista or Spike Feeder. The Ballista can remove counters to damage things, so if you give it lifelink with Heliod, you can just ping as many times as you want to. With the Feeder, you can remove counters to gain life, and gain as much life as you want to, so having the Mentor in play too in that situation means you can grow your creatures as much as you want to and swing for lethal that turn as well. Moreover, the Mentor can also just be part of aggro starts, where it makes all your plus and plus 1 counter stuff way better. The Mentor is likely to gain more points in Modern in the future. At number 4, it's Lagana Band Trailblazer. For 1 white mana, it's a 0/4, and it has Heroic, so it gives you a bonus anytime you cast a spell that targets it. In this case, it gets a +1/+1 counter. The high toughness combined with Heroic makes a 0-power creature a surprisingly formidable 1-drop. Unsurprisingly, it saw play in Heroic decks in both Block and Standard, which obviously specialize in targeting your stuff as much as possible, and more recently it's been played in Pauper, a format where only commons are legal, where it also sees play in Heroic-focused decks. Lagana Band Trailblazer is likely to gain more points in the future. At number 3, it's Centaur Healer. For 1 generic, a green and a white, it's a 3/3 that gains you 3 life when it enters the battlefield. Creatures with solid stat lines that gain life when they enter are surprisingly good at derailing an opposing aggro deck's plans, since this one card is likely to make it much harder for them to kill you quickly or even win a race. This is because it's big enough to trade off with something and gain you life. It saw both main deck and sideboard play while it was in Standard, a format where Restoration Angel was one of the best creatures around. The Angel could rebuy the 3 life into the battlefield ability at instant speed, making an opponent's life even harder. But it hasn't gained any points since rotating out of Standard. At number 2, it's Nylea's Disciple. For 2 generic and 2 green, it's a 3/3, and when it enters the battlefield, it gains you life equal to your devotion to green. Your devotion is equal to the number of green mana symbols on your permanents, so if the Disciple is all alone, you gain 2 life, but it's almost never going to be alone in the decks that use it. Like Centaur Healer, this gives you a creature that can gain you a ton of life in addition to adding a real body to the board, and while it's less efficient as a creature, it has a way higher ceiling when it comes to life gain. Unsurprisingly, the Disciple has been played in the sideboards of Devotion to Green decks in both Standard and Pioneer, and it's also a common sideboard card in Pauper, where it's a great way to shut down the format's aggro and burn decks. The Disciple is likely to gain more points in the future, but it has no real hope of ever catching the number 1 card on the list because it is head and shoulders better than all the Centaurs ever printed, and that card is Courser of Kruphix. For 1 generic and 2 green, it's a 2/4 enchantment creature, and you play with the top card of your library revealed, and you can play lands from the top of your library, and you gain 1 life anytime a land enters the battlefield under your control. You know, going into the list, I didn't really think of Centaurs as having a big life gain identity, but 4 of the top 5 cards on the list do gain you life. Anyway, Courser of Kruphix is an amazing value engine. Being able to play lands off the top of your library is a big deal, as every time you're able to do that, you're effectively drawing a card. Because you can play lands off the top of your library, this helps you get closer to drawing non-lands, while also adding to your resources in play, and that's just great. Gaining life all game long is pretty effective, especially against more aggressive decks who struggle to attack through a 2/4 anyway. The Courser was heavily played in both Block and Standard, where it was effectively a staple, appearing in just about every green deck there was. However, the Courser has proven itself outside of those formats too. It's been played in Modern, where it's gained points in Jund and Valakut. These days, it's the most active in Pioneer, having gained points in Sultai Delirium, Omnath Ramp, Devotion to Green, and Collected Company decks. It's going to keep gaining points in Pioneer, and it already has a massive lead over every other Centaur on the list, so it's hard to imagine any future Centaur ever taking its place. So those are the top 10 Centaurs in Magic. Do you want to build a Centaur deck? If so, check out the description where you can find a direct Card Kingdom link for each card that appeared in the video. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future videos, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to catch up on more than 750 other MTG top 10s, including many more that look at creature types, you should see a playlist on your screen shortly. Thanks for watching.